I want to say something about the organic nature of things versus the pre-planned. I think there are some things that happened organically that you can't control for, and it's hard to figure out what to do with them. I was at a meeting right before this with an attorney who is a part of what I consider an organic reaction to Trump's immigration edicts. And you had attorneys and 500 people show up at DFW. That was not a planned demonstration that I can account for. Just like
that's not a social movement,
but they're working to turn it into one, and that's one of it's going to be very interesting to see how all of these reactive things that we've seen since Trump took office, whether or not there are people that get in leadership positions and turn these around. One is the women's movement on healthcare issues. One is immigration issues. Mainly, I see environmentalists just reacting to the situation right now. But from time to time, you do have things that are organic, and you need to think about how to grab a hold of that. And one is the whole difference in the activism that Mavis and Jim and I were all in the 70s, the result of Reagan getting elected, the reaction to his really crazy ass comments, kind of like Trump now, and the birth of the nuclear weapons freeze campaign. One of the side things that came out of the nuclear weapons freeze campaign are grassroots peace organizations in communities all over the country that, whether or not they're having a real impact, they exist. And the Dallas Peace Center was founded by Mennonites in the 1982, and it's morphed into the Dallas Peace and Justice Center, and it's much more secular now. But there's kind of a direct lineage with a lot of these groups. You got the Oklahoma Peace House. You've got, I'm active with the Friends Committee on National Legislation. The woman that's our executive secretary came out of the anti-nuke movement in Nebraska. So there's things that you can control for, and you want to plan and strategize. I mean, I went to graduate school in the city regional planning, saying somebody's going to plan your life. It's either you or them. Who do you want to be in charge? But there are organic things that happen that you need to be ready to take advantage of.
To me, too, the anti-nuclear movement was the first time that the environmental movement kind of took on a local stance, a grassroots stance, rather than kind of top down, or like before that there was a national law that you needed to pass, or there was a park that needed. This was talking about environmentalism from a different perspective and also localizing it. There wasn't a national group that was,
You're
in fact,
right.
Sierra Club was very much scared of
Wouldn't touch it with a
nuclear power at
10-foot
the time.
pole.
It was very
Yeah.
controversial because this was seen as a clean source of energy and
Well,
so on.
and it was a grassroots thing, and let's be sure to mention the power of popular media. China Syndrome just pushed this forward, the film, 3 Mile Island, pushed it forward, and because of that, people that had not necessarily been politically involved with anything came together to protect their community. Wait a minute, they're building one of these things 45 miles southwest of my home, where my parents live, where my brothers live, where I live. And it becomes a lot more personal. Just like Jim's experience with Downwinders at Risk. Your best activists have a personal story to tell. I'm a puffer, and are most of the other people, they're either related to puffers or they aren't puffer, the people that are most involved with air issues. I don't know why I went off on that, but I had to.
No, so you also need to understand the timeline here. 1977 or so is exactly the same time that Lois Gibbs is fighting her situation in Love Canal. So that's the start of the whole anti-toxics movement in the country, and both the anti-nuclear movement and the anti-toxics movement then spin this whole other thing out that becomes environmental justice issues, that becomes the basis for a lot of environmentalism today. That's not top down, it's bottom up. And that's basically all tied back to that decade in the 70s when that happened.
When I went to graduate school, it was more about city planning and about parks for kids and that sort of thing. And in part because of the anti-nuke movement and the toxic movement, I moved over to my focus in the environmental community is on toxics. I'm worried about the things that kill people and affect the gene pool. And that's kind of like an emergency room response to environmentalism, but that's what it is.
So do you think what do you think, I mean, other than being an interesting history lesson now for these guys, what do you think the trial actually did at the time? Do you remember the impact that it did, or was it worth going through all that, or?
For a lot of the people in the room at the time, in our meetings, these were, for the most part, working people, some degree, everywhere from college degree plus, down to people who were just mechanics, who had no technical, no educational credibility at all. And especially for those people, when we were meeting in these consensus kind of groups, it was the first time in their lives anyone had listened to them. It really was. And once someone listens to you and takes what you say seriously, it changes your life forever. You can never go back from that.
That was the first movement where feminism had a huge impact on the structured decision-making process and so on. Can you just talk about that and just how that manifested itself in the movement and up to this point, how that's maybe been inherited?
I think it grew largely out of the Vietnam War movement and to some degree also the civil rights movement, where women realized they were working their butts off and their own needs weren't being heard, whatsoever, by either of those movements. For the most part, men ran them all. And women just said no. And it was enough.
Let's be real blunt. The anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement was very hierarchical, very male-dominated, and women were run off and underappreciated. And
So
I think there's an evolution that began with movements of the 70s, the late 70s.
Well, the new movement is the exact opposit of that. If you think about it, it's feminist-oriented, it's consensus-oriented. It went out of its way to be affinity groups. That was the basic organizing structure, and you had vibes watchers in those affinity groups to make sure the groups
even that word,
yeah,
even that phrase, yeah.
So do you think that's, besides giving women the opportunity to participate in a way they maybe didn't before through the anti-nuclear movement, that's what I saw at least. And what I've seen in most of the grassroots environmental groups that I've worked for, they've been dominated by women.
This is no longer a male-dominated discussion. It's still a lot wider than it ought to be. We have not done a good job at bringing in the rest of our communities or sharing their concerns and finding ways to weave those together. But that took a long time for women's issues too to be woven into traditional environmental movements. And it took women walking out sometimes. That was literally what had to happen to allow that change to take place.